February 22, 1943, 1955 hours, North Atlantic. Captain William Bradford stood on the bridge of the USCGC Defender, watching green phosphorescence bloom on the radar screen. A contact, 4,600 yards out, moving. The sea was black. The sky was black. Everything beyond the bridge windows was an endless void, broken only by the white foam of waves rolling past the hull. Bradford was 40 years old, 20 years in the Coast Guard, 2 years hunting German submarines in these waters, 0 kills. He wiped salt spray from his face and leaned closer to the radar operator. The contact was still there, still moving. Surface vessel in U-boat waters at night. That meant one thing. Bradford's voice cut through the bridge noise. "Sound general quarters, all hands to battle stations." The alarm shattered the night. Men ran to their posts. Gun crews scrambled up ladders. Depth charge teams moved to the stern rails. In seconds, Defender transformed from a dark shape, drifting through the Atlantic into a warship ready to fight. But Bradford knew the odds. 20 months of convoy duty, 20 months of dropping depth charges into black water and watching oil slicks rise to the surface, 20 months of damaged submarines limping away into the deep, 20 months of merchant ships burning on the horizon while he failed to stop the wolves that hunted them. The Coast Guard had transferred to Navy control when the war started. Bradford had commanded Defender since December 1941. They'd escorted convoys from Britain to North America and back. They'd rescued drowning sailors from sinking ships. They'd dodged torpedoes. They'd fired thousands of rounds at contacts that vanished into sonar shadows. They had never confirmed a kill, not once. The weight of that failure pressed down on Bradford's shoulders like the Atlantic itself. Every merchant ship that went down, every sailor who died screaming in 36-degree water, every convoy that scattered in the night while U-boats picked them off one by one. All of it happened while he watched, while he tried, while he failed. February 1943 was the worst month of the Battle of the Atlantic. 120 ships sunk worldwide, 82 of them in these waters. German Admiral Dönitz had deployed over 100 U-boats into the mid-ocean gap, that 600-mile stretch beyond the range of land-based aircraft where the Wolfpacks operated with near impunity. Convoy SC-147 had departed Liverpool on February 11th, 63 merchant ships carrying supplies, 8 escorts trying to protect them. Defender and her sister cutter led the formation. 5 corvettes from Canada and Britain provided additional screening. A Polish destroyer joined mid-crossing, 8 escorts against 19 German submarines. The convoy had sailed through 8 days of gales. Ships scattered. Lost formation became easy targets. On February 20th, a Norwegian freighter went down at dawn, the Stigstad, torpedoed by U-332, went to the bottom with her entire crew and cargo. Then February 21st started with blood in the water. The British ship Empire Trader took a torpedo at 8:32 in the evening. She broke in half. Sank in 4 minutes. 70 men died. 2 hours later, the Norwegian tanker Nielsen Alonso exploded. Bradford saw the flash from 12 miles away. Orange fire blooming against the night sky. Then the sound reached them, a deep boom that rolled across the water like thunder. He ordered flank speed. Defender's engines roared. The cutter surged forward, throwing spray across her bow. When they arrived, the tanker was still burning. Fuel oil spread across the surface, creating a lake of fire. Men were in the water, 50 Norwegian sailors, screaming, drowning, dying. The water temperature was 36 degrees Fahrenheit. Survival time was 15 minutes, maximum. Bradford brought Defender alongside the burning wreckage, close enough that the heat blistered paint on the starboard hull, close enough that his crew could throw lines to men struggling in the oil-slicked waves. They worked in silence. No orders needed. Every man knew what to do. Pull them in, one at a time, hand over hand, don't let go. 50 men went into that freezing water. Defender's crew pulled out 50 men, every single one alive. Bradford watched them come aboard, shivering, hypothermic, covered in fuel oil, but breathing, their hearts still beating. 50 lives saved. But the night wasn't finished. The tanker's captain had gone down with his ship. That meant confidential materials were still aboard the wreckage. Codebooks, radio frequencies, orders, all of it sinking slowly into the Atlantic. All of it potential intelligence for the Germans if they could salvage it. Bradford had to go back, had to destroy what couldn't be recovered. He ordered Defender to return to the Nielsen Alonzo. They closed to within 1 mile, close enough to see flames still dancing on the surface, close enough to... A torpedo wake cut across their stern. White phosphorescence in the black water, arrow straight, moving fast. It missed by yards. The explosion threw a column of water 20 feet into the air. The shockwave hit Defender's hull like a hammer. Men stumbled, grabbed for handholds, stayed on their feet. A U-boat had fired at them during the rescue operation while they were saving drowning sailors. Bradford felt something cold settle into his chest, not fear, something darker, something that had been building for 20 months of failures and missed chances and men dying while he watched. He ordered, depth charges dropped, 6 Mark 7 charges, set shallow, rolling off the stern rails into the darkness. The explosions lit up the sea, 6 white flowers blooming in sequence, concussion waves rippled outward, water geysered skyward. Then silence, no debris, no oil slick, no confirmation. The U-boat had escaped. Again. Bradford turned Defender back toward the convoy. Behind them, the Nielsen Alonzo slipped beneath the surface. In front of them, merchant ships scattered across miles of ocean, some burning, some already gone. 14 ships would be lost from convoy SC-147 before the Wolfpack withdrew. Over 200 merchant seamen would die in the freezing water. The Germans were winning. Throughout February 21st and into the 22nd, Defender attacked multiple sonar contacts, dropped pattern after pattern of depth charges, forced submarines to dive, damaged at least 2 badly enough that they had to withdraw from the hunt. But every time Bradford chased one U-boat, others slipped through the gaps in the escort screen. Every time he stopped to rescue survivors, torpedoes found new targets. The convoy was hemorrhaging, ships and men and hope. Bradford hadn't slept in 36 hours. His uniform was stiff with dried salt spray. His eyes burned from staring into the darkness. His throat was raw from giving orders. But he stayed on the bridge, watching, waiting, because somewhere out there in the Black Atlantic, 19 German submarines were still hunting, and he had failed to stop them. 20 years of service, 2 years of war, 0 confirmed kills. The numbers echoed in his head like an accusation. Now it was 1955 hours on February 22nd. The radar operator called out ranges as the contact closed. 4,000 yards, 3,500, 3,000. Bradford's executive officer, Commander David Walsh, climbed to the bridge. He was 10 years younger than Bradford. Smart, capable, good in a crisis. He'd been with Defender since she commissioned. Walsh studied the radar screen. Surface contact, moving slow. Could be a damaged U-boat trying to escape. Bradford nodded. His hands gripped the bridge rail, white-knuckled. This could be it. After 20 months, after all the failures, after all the men who died while he watched. This could be the moment everything changed. Or it could be another miss, another contact that vanished, another failure added to the list. "Full speed ahead," Bradford said. "Close to visual range." Defender's engines beat faster. The deck vibrated beneath their feet. The cutter surged forward through the swells. 3 minutes later, sonar picked up the contact at 2,400 yards, narrowing fast. 1,700 yards, 1,200 yards, 12. At 20:19 hours, the lookout spotted it. U-boat, 350 yards off the starboard bow. Bradford swung his binoculars toward the contact. There, running on the surface, low in the water, conning tower visible, diesel engines leaving a white wake, a German Type 9C submarine, 760 tons, 45-man crew, already damaged. The conning tower showed blast marks from depth charges. She was listing slightly to port, struggling to maintain speed. The Polish destroyer Bursa had caught this one, hammered it with depth charges until it couldn't dive. Now the submarine was trying to escape on the surface, running for open water where it might repair damage and slip away. Bradford had seconds to make a decision. He could follow doctrine, drop depth charges, fire the guns, chase the submarine and hope for a kill. Safe, predictable, the way they'd done it for 20 months, the way that had failed for 20 months. Or he could do something the German commander would never expect, something that might sink his own ship, something that 70 years later people would call either genius or insane. Bradford's mind raced through calculations. Defender was 327 feet long, 20.5 knots, maximum speed. The U-boat was slower, already damaged. They could close the distance in seconds. Walsh appeared at his shoulder. "Sir, we have firing solution for the forward gun. We can ram her." The words came out flat, final, no hesitation. Walsh stared at him. "Sir? Ram her? Full right rudder. All ahead flank." For one heartbeat, Walsh didn't move. Ramming an enemy vessel was not Coast Guard doctrine. It was barely Navy doctrine. The risk of catastrophic damage to both ships was too high. The chance of sinking was too great. But Walsh had served with Bradford for 2 years. He'd watched the captain rescue 50 men from burning water. He'd seen Bradford refuse to quit when every other escort turned back to the convoy. He'd learned to trust the old man's instincts. Walsh grabbed the engine room telegraph and slammed it to flank speed. "All ahead flank! Hard right rudder!" Defender swung to starboard. Her bow came around, pointed directly at the U-boat's hull. The German submarine was U-573. Her commander was Kapitänleutnant Klaus Reinhardt, 30 years old. He'd taken command in November 1942, 3 months ago. He'd already sunk 3 ships from this convoy. The Empire Redshank, the American freighter Chattanooga City, the Expositor, all torpedoed after sunset, all gone to the bottom. Then Bursa had caught him. The Polish destroyer's depth charges had damaged U-573's diving planes and cracked her pressure hull. Water was flooding into the battery compartment. Chlorine gas was seeping through the boat. Reinhardt couldn't dive, could barely maneuver. He was trying to escape on diesel power when Defender's radar found him. Now he had 18 seconds before impact. Defender closed at 18 knots. Her bow wave pushed ahead in a white foam crest. The range collapsed. 300 yards. 200, 150. Every gun on Defender that could bear on target opened fire. 20mm cannons hammered out streams of tracers. 3-inch 50 caliber guns boomed. Shells slammed into U-573's conning tower. Metal shrieked against metal. Orange sparks flew into the night. On Defender's starboard side, Gun 4 came to life. A 3-inch 50 caliber gun manned entirely by black crew members. Chief Steward Marcus Hayes was gun captain. 9 mess attendants served as loader, pointer, trainer, and ammunition handlers. They'd trained for this moment for 2 years. Drilled in port, practiced at sea, never fired in anger. Until now, Hayes gave the order. "Load, fire!" The gun roared. Recoil slammed it back on its mount. The crew worked like a machine. Load, aim, fire, load, aim, fire. 32 rounds of 3-inch shells, every one of them straight into the U-boat's hull. Hayes watched the German crew assembling on the conning tower, preparing to abandon ship. None tried to man the deck gun. They knew they were finished. He kept firing anyway. For every time someone said he couldn't, for every time they relegated him to the galley instead of giving him a real battle station, for every man in that crew who'd trained for 2 years to prove they belonged, the shells found their mark. Defender struck U-573 at 21 hours. The impact threw men off their feet on both vessels. Bradford grabbed the bridge rail to stay upright. The sound was enormous, metal grinding against metal, hull plates screaming. Defender's bow scraped along U-573's starboard side, a glancing blow. Not the direct ram Bradford had intended, but close enough. Then U-573's bowplane caught Defender's hull. The diving plane was solid steel, sharp-edged, designed to cut through water at depth. It cut through Defender's hull instead. The bowplane tore a gash 15 feet long, 8 inches wide, 3 feet below the waterline, right through the engine room plating. Salt water exploded into the compartment under pressure, the North Atlantic flooding in with the force of a broken dam. Machinery spaces filled in seconds, generators shorted out in showers of sparks, electrical systems failed across the ship. Defender went dark, every light extinguished. The engine room crew abandoned their stations, water rising past their knees, past their waists, the entire stern compartment flooding. On the bridge, something hit Captain Bradford. Shell fragments, from where nobody knew. Defender's own guns firing at close range, German small arms fire, shrapnel from somewhere in the chaos. The fragments caught him near his left ear, cut his eyelid. Blood ran down the side of his face. He didn't move from his position, just wiped the blood away and kept watching. As Defender scraped past the submarine, her depth charge crew dropped 2 Mark 7 charges, 600 pounds of high explosive each, set for shallow detonation. They hit the water behind U-573, sank, detonated. The submarine lifted 4 feet out of the water. Her entire hull came up, visible for 3 seconds in the explosion's flash of light. Then she crashed back down, dead in the water. Her stern settled lower, taking on water through ruptured tanks. Her crew scrambled. Some jumped overboard into the freezing Atlantic. Others stayed on the conning tower, waiting. Defender drifted past. No power, no lights, just momentum carrying her forward through the darkness. Below decks, the flooding was catastrophic. Engine room crew fought their way through rising water to reach the ladders. Emergency hatches slammed shut. Watertight doors sealed. Men trapped on the wrong side pounded on steel plates and screamed. Commander Walsh appeared at Bradford's side. His face was pale in the darkness. "Captain, we have a report from damage control. We're flooding. Bad." Bradford wiped more blood from his eye. The cut on his eyelid was deep. It wouldn't stop bleeding. "How bad?" 15-foot gash below the waterline. Engine room taking on water. Pumps are running, but they can't keep up. Walsh stopped, swallowed. "Sir, we're sinking." In the water behind them, U-573 was going down too, just faster. Her crew was in the water now, yelling in German, screaming for help. The North Atlantic at 36 degrees killed in minutes. Most of them were already dying. Defender's lookouts could hear them, could see them thrashing in the darkness. But Defender couldn't maneuver. No engines, no power. Just drifting. Some of the German crew drifted close enough to grab. Defender's men threw lines, pulled them aboard when they could. Most didn't make it. Kapitän Leutnant Klaus Reinhardt was already dead, killed in Defender's initial barrage. A 3-inch shell had struck the conning tower, blown him off the tower into the sea. His body was somewhere in the black water, sinking. The warrant quartermaster had taken command of U-573 in those final seconds. He panicked, ordered everyone into the water. thought the incoming fire would kill anyone who stayed on deck. He was wrong. The fire stopped after impact, but his order killed them anyway. 37 men from U-573's crew of 47 died, most from exposure, some drowned, a few from their wounds. The Polish destroyer Bursa arrived at 21:30 hours. She'd been chasing another sonar contact. Heard defenders' radio calls, turned back. Now she circled the two dying ships, protecting them, hunting for more submarines. Her crew pulled 7 Germans from U-573's conning tower. They were the last survivors, the ones who had ignored the order to abandon ship. 12 prisoners total, 5 rescued by Defender, 7 by Bursa, 12 men out of 47. U-573 slipped beneath the surface just after midnight. Her conning tower disappeared. Air bubbles broke the surface for a few minutes, then nothing. She settled to the ocean floor. 2,200 feet down, the first U-boat sunk by ramming in the Battle of the Atlantic. The first U-boat kill for any United States Coast Guard cutter in World War II. Captain William Bradford stood on Defender's darkened bridge. Blood still running down his face, watching the spot where U-573 had gone down. 20 years in the Coast Guard, 2 years hunting U-boats. Finally, 1 kill. But Commander Walsh was right. Defender was sinking too. The engine room was drowning. Water poured through the 15-foot gash in Defender's hull, 3 feet deep and rising, cold Atlantic seawater flooding into every compartment in the stern. The pumps were running, all of them, electric pumps, gasoline-powered emergency pumps, hand pumps worked by crews in rotating shifts. They weren't enough. Commander Walsh supervised the damage control teams. Men worked in near darkness with emergency lanterns and flashlights. The flooding had killed the ship's generators. No power meant no lights. No lights meant men working by feel, running their hands along pipes and valves and bulkheads, trying to stop the ocean from claiming what it wanted. Walsh made his way to the bridge at 20:35 hours. His uniform was soaked, his face was grim. Bradford turned to face him. Blood had crusted on the captain's face from the shrapnel wounds. His left eye was swollen almost shut. "Report." Walsh pulled out a damage diagram, marked in pencil with notations from the inspection teams. The gash is 15 feet long, 8 inches wide, 3 feet below the waterline, right through the engine room plating. The bow plane didn't just puncture us, it tore through frame members and damaged the internal bulkheads. Bradford studied the diagram. "Can we patch it?" "Not from inside. Water pressure is too high. We tried. Lost 2 men when a temporary patch failed. They're okay, but we can't risk it again." "From outside?" Walsh nodded. "We're rigging a collision mat. Heavy canvas reinforced with rope. We'll run it under the bow and back along the hull. Cover the gash from outside. Weight it with lines to hold it in place." "How long?" 3 hours, maybe more. Working in darkness. Ship rolling in the swells. Bradford looked out at the black ocean. U-573 was still afloat. Barely. Her stern was underwater. Her conning tower above the surface. German crew members stood on the tower. Some were eating, others were drinking. Sausages and rum. Champagne from the officers' stores. They'd opened the bottles when they knew they were finished. No point letting good liquor sink to the bottom. Lieutenant Peter Morgan had already launched Defender's motorboat. 6 volunteers went with him. Their orders were simple. Get to U-573, take prisoners, maybe capture the submarine before she sank. Morgan's boat approached the dying submarine at 2100 hours. 5 Germans climbed down into the boat. 1 officer, 4 enlisted men, all of them shivering, all of them knowing they were lucky. The North Atlantic had already killed most of their shipmates. Morgan spoke German, enough to ask questions. "Your commander?" The German officer was young, maybe 25. His teeth were chattering so hard he could barely speak. Dead. First salvo. Shell to the conning tower. Took his head off. Morgan looked back at the submarine. More Germans were in the water. Screaming. Dying. The motorboat couldn't maneuver fast enough to save them all. The cold killed too quickly. Defender's crew threw lines when survivors drifted close enough, pulled men from the sea when they could reach them. Most didn't make it. Hypothermia killed them before help arrived. Their screams faded, their thrashing stopped. They slipped under the black water and didn't come back up. The Polish destroyer Bursa arrived at 21:30 hours. She circled the wreckage, hunting for more submarines, protecting the two dying ships. Her crew pulled 7 more Germans from U-573's conning tower, the last survivors, the ones who had stayed on deck instead of jumping into the water. 12 men total saved, 37 dead. U-573 slipped beneath the surface at 0:15 hours. February 23rd. Her conning tower disappeared. Air bubbles rose for a few minutes. Then the ocean was quiet again. 2,200 feet down, the first U-boat killed by ramming, the first kill for the United States Coast Guard in this war. But Defender was dying too. The collision mat operation began at 20:35 hours. Walsh organized teams on deck, men running lines under Defender's bow, back along the hull, down to where the gash leaked Atlantic seawater into the engine room. The ship rolled in the swells. 8-foot waves, maybe 10, lines tangled, parted, had to be reset. They worked by touch. No floodlights, no deck lights, just emergency lanterns and the occasional flash of a hand light. One man slipped, fell between the hull and a tender boat. The crew grabbed him, pulled him back on deck before the boats crushed him. Nobody spoke about how close it had been. At 0200 hours, they got the collision mat in place. Heavy canvas pressed against the hull by the water pressure. Weighted lines holding it there. The flooding slowed, didn't stop. Water still came through the gash, just less of it. Enough that the pumps could almost keep pace. Almost. Defender was stable. For now. But she couldn't move, couldn't defend herself, couldn't do anything except float and hope. Commander Walsh returned to the bridge at 02:45 hours. Mat is holding, Captain. Flooding has slowed, but we're still taking on water. The pumps are barely keeping up. Bradford nodded. He hadn't moved from his position. Blood still crusted on his face. The shrapnel wounds hadn't been treated. He refused to go below, refused medical attention. His ship was dying. He would stay with her until she sank, or until they reached port. Walsh hesitated. "Sir, you need to let the corpsman look at those wounds." "Later." "Captain, I said later." Walsh knew better than to argue. He'd served with Bradford long enough to recognize that tone. At 0300 hours, Bursa came alongside, close enough to pass lines. Her captain sent a message by signal lamp. "Time to evacuate. Defender couldn't be saved out here. She needed a tow, a long tow. 800 miles to the nearest port. That would take days, maybe a week. The convoy couldn't wait. Other U-boats were still attacking. Merchant ships still needed protection. Most of Defender's crew had to go. Bradford assembled the men on deck, 200 faces looking up at him in the darkness, men he'd commanded for 2 years, men who'd survived Atlantic duty, men who'd just helped him sink a U-boat and save their ship. He kept his voice level. "We're evacuating to Bursa. Essential personnel only will stay aboard. Damage control teams, officers, senior enlisted, men who can keep this ship afloat. Everyone else transfers now." A young seaman raised his hand, Miller, 20 years old, from Iowa. "Sir, how many staying?" Bradford looked at Walsh. The executive officer had already done the math. 73, sir." 73 men will stay aboard. The rest of you go with Bursa. She'll escort us as long as possible, then rejoin the convoy." The crew stood silent. Nobody wanted to leave. But orders were orders. 120 men climbed onto the Polish destroyer. The 50 Norwegian survivors from the tanker went too. Bursa's decks were packed, men standing shoulder to shoulder. Bradford made one exception to the evacuation order. Rex stayed aboard. The dog had been Defender's mascot since 1937, 6 years, officially enlisted, service record, dog tags, his own hammock in the crew quarters, black and tan fur, white eyebrows, smart eyes that seemed to understand everything happening around him. The crew believed he brought luck, believed the ship couldn't sink while Rex was aboard. Bradford agreed, or maybe he just understood what his remaining 73 men needed, something to believe in, something beyond pumps and patches and prayer. Rex stayed, 73 men stayed, Defender stayed afloat, barely. Dawn came at 0630 hours, grey light, heavy seas. Defender drifted without power in the middle of the Atlantic. The collision mat held. Water still leaked through, pumps ran constantly, bucket brigades formed, men passing buckets up ladders, throwing water over the side, trying to bail out the ocean with desperation and will. It wasn't enough to empty the engine room, but it was enough to keep the water level from rising. That would have to do. Walsh organized the work in shifts, 4 hours on, 4 hours trying to rest. Nobody really slept. The engine room was too loud, pumps running, men shouting, metal creaking as the ship rolled. And below everything, the constant sound of water, sloshing, dripping, reminding them that the Atlantic was patient. It would wait. Bursa stayed close, circling. Her sonar pinged constantly, searching for submarines. 3 U-boats were still operating in the area, U-604, U-628, U-186, all hunting, all looking for targets. A crippled Coast Guard cutter dead in the water would be an easy kill. At 0800 hours on February 23rd, Bursa detected a submarine contact. She raced toward it. Depth charges rolled off her stern. Explosions lit up the grey dawn. The contact vanished, might have been destroyed, might have dove deep and escaped. No way to know. Bursa returned to Defender, resumed her circling patrol. The Canadian corvette Dufferin arrived at noon. Small ship, 950 tons, but she had engines, weapons, sonar. She took over escort duty, let Bursa return to the convoy. The merchant ships needed protection. Defender would have to wait for a tow. Bradford stood on the bridge, still bleeding, still refusing medical attention. His executive officer brought him coffee. Black, strong. The kind that had been sitting on a hot plate for 6 hours. Bradford drank it. Watched the horizon. 800 miles to St. John's, Newfoundland, nearest friendly port, nearest shipyard, nearest safety. At towing speed, maybe 4 knots, maybe less in heavy seas. That meant 8 days minimum, probably 10, maybe 2 weeks if weather turned bad. Defender's pumps could keep running that long. Maybe. The diesel generators were underwater. Ruined, but they had emergency pumps, hand pumps, bucket brigades. They could keep her afloat as long as the gash didn't get bigger, as long as another storm didn't hit, as long as no U-boat found them, as long as luck held. At 1400 hours, the damage control teams tried something desperate. They had portable gasoline pumps, small pumps meant for firefighting. They rigged them in the engine room, got them running. They helped, not much, but every gallon per minute counted. The water level in the engine room stayed constant, 3 feet deep, not rising, not falling, just constant. The men working down there rotated every 30 minutes. Any longer and hypothermia became a problem. The water was cold, the air was cold, everything was cold. They worked in near darkness, emergency lanterns, hand lights, the only illumination. Up on deck, lookouts watched for periscopes, for torpedo wakes, for anything. The ocean was empty. Grey waves, grey sky. No other ships visible. Just Defender, Duffer encircling, and 800 miles of open water between them and safety. February 23rd passed. No attacks, no storms, no disasters, just steady pumping, constant vigilance, slow drifting. Defender moved with the current, northeast, away from Newfoundland, away from safety. Every hour of drift meant more hours of towing later. Rex moved through the ship, visiting crew members, letting men pet him, scratch his ears. The dog seemed to understand something was wrong, stayed calm, stayed close to the crew. Men took turns sharing their rations with him, saved bits of food. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone thought it. As long as Rex stayed aboard, the ship wouldn't sink. Superstition, maybe. But after one day without power, one day pumping water, one day drifting in U-boat waters, men needed something to believe in. At 2200 hours, HMS Salisbury arrived, an old American four-pipe destroyer, transferred to Britain in 1940, now manned by Norwegians. Free Norwegian Navy, she'd been hunting U-boats near the convoy, got orders to reinforce Defender's escort. 2 escorts now, better odds. Still not safe. U-boats operated in wolf packs. If they found Defender, 2 escorts might not be enough. Might not matter. Defender couldn't run, couldn't hide, could only float and wait. February 24th, still no tow. Defender drifted northeast, away from safety. The crew worked the pumps, watched the horizons, waited. Bradford's wounds had stopped bleeding, crusted over. His medical officer begged him to let them clean and dress the cuts properly. Bradford refused. "I'll deal with it when we reach port, if we reach port." Rex moved through the ship on his rounds. Engine room crew, galley, bridge, back to engine room. The dog had a routine. Men watched for it. As long as Rex stayed calm, they stayed calm. February 25th, 0600 hours, 3 days since the ramming. Defender was still afloat, still drifting, still pumping. The water level in the engine room held at 3 feet. The collision mat was holding, the gasoline pumps were working. Everything was holding, barely. At 1500 hours, a message came through on the emergency radio. British seagoing tug Tenacity was en route from St. John's, ETA, February 26th, 2 days away. She'd bring 2 British escorts, take Defender in tow, get her home. 2 more days. Defender's crew could manage 2 more days. They'd already done 3. What was 2 more? The pumps kept running. The water level held steady. The collision mat held. And somewhere ahead, coming through 800 miles of ocean, a tugboat was racing toward them. Defender just had to stay afloat until she arrived. But at 0400 hours on February 26th, the last gasoline pump failed. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. Men scrambled to restart it, checked the fuel line, the spark plugs, the carburetor. Nothing worked. The pump was dead. Water in the engine room started rising. 3 feet, 3.5, 4 feet. The hand pumps couldn't keep up. The bucket brigades couldn't keep up. Defender was losing. Walsh found Bradford on the bridge at 0430 hours. "Captain, we've lost the last gasoline pump. Water is rising. We're at 4 feet and climbing." Bradford stared at the dark ocean. They were so close. Tenacity would arrive in less than 12 hours, but 12 hours might be too long. Walsh spoke quietly. "Sir, maybe we should consider abandoning ship. Salisbury can take us aboard. We've done everything we can." Bradford turned to face his executive officer. Blood crusted on his face, wounds still unstitched, eyes red from exhaustion. "How many men we got?" 73, sir." "How many pumps still working?" "Hand pumps only. 8 of them." Bradford looked past Walsh, down at the main deck, at the men working the hand pumps. 4 men per pump, 30 minutes on, 30 minutes rest, then back to it. They'd been doing this for 3 days. Some of them hadn't slept more than an hour at a time, but none of them had quit. Bradford's voice was quiet, final. "Rig every hand pump we have. Every man who can work takes a shift. We pump until the tug arrives or until we sink. No middle ground, no quitting." Walsh held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Aye, sir." Word spread through the ship, every able-bodied man to pump stations. Chief Steward Marcus Hayes and the men from gun crew number 4 reported first. "We pump, Captain," the young seaman from Iowa, Miller, still awake after 36 hours. "For the ones who didn't make it off U-573, sir, we pump." 73 men, 8 hand pumps, shifts. Every 30 minutes they pumped until their hands bled, until their backs screamed, until they couldn't stand. Then they rested for 30 minutes and pumped again. The water level in the engine room stopped rising. 4 feet, holding. Dawn came on February 26th, cold, clear. Lookout spotted smoke on the horizon, southeast, coming toward them. The British tug Tenacity, she'd left St. John's 2 days earlier, steamed 800 miles without escort, through U-boat waters, coming to save Defender. Bradford wiped blood from his eye, looked at the approaching tug. 2 more days of pumping, maybe 3. His ship had refused to sink for 4 days. She could last a little longer. She had to. Tenacity was a sea-going tug built for ocean work. Powerful engines, heavy towing gear. She'd pulled disabled ships across the Atlantic before. Never one this damaged, never one flooding this badly, never one this far from port. She came alongside Defender at 0900 hours on February 26th. Her crew started rigging towing lines immediately, heavy steel cables running from Tenacity's stern to Defender's bow. The connection took 3 hours. Working in heavy seas, Defender rolling, lines getting tangled, having to be reset. Bradford watched from the bridge. He hadn't left his post in 4 days. Blood still crusted on his face from the shrapnel wounds. His uniform was stiff with dried salt and sweat. Walsh appeared beside him with coffee. The executive officer looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. 4 days of managing damage control with almost no sleep. "Captain, the corpsman insists on treating your wounds." Bradford took the coffee, didn't answer. "Sir, they could get infected." "They can wait until we dock." Walsh knew better than to push. He'd been making this argument for 4 days. At 1400 hours, the cables were secure. Tenacity's engines roared. The steel cables went taut, stretched. Water squeezed out of the braided metal. Defender began to move, slowly. 4 knots, maybe less. Bow pointed southwest, toward Newfoundland, toward safety, toward home. 800 miles to go. At 4 knots, that meant 200 hours, 8 days, maybe more if weather turned bad. Defender's pumps had been running for 4 days. They needed to run for 8 more. The towing cable stretched behind Defender, a lifeline, the only thing between her and the bottom. If that cable parted, Defender would drift again. If the gash got worse, pumps couldn't keep up. If another storm hit, she'd capsize. If a U-boat found them, both ships would die. Tenacity's captain knew the risks. Came anyway. The 2 British escorts took positions ahead and behind, screening the tow, watching for submarines. The convoy was gone. Already arrived in North America. Safe. Defender was alone now. Just her, the tug, 2 escorts, and 800 miles of ocean. February 26th became February 27th. The tow continued. 4 knots, steady. Defender's stern rolled lower than her bow. The weight of water in the engine room pulling her down. But she stayed afloat. The collision mat held. Pumps kept pace with the leaking, barely. Below decks, Defender's crew maintained the pumps. The gasoline pumps were dead, only hand pumps now. 4 men per pump. 30 minutes on, 30 minutes rest, then back to it. When the pumps ran low on fuel, men hauled jerry cans from storage. Refueled without stopping the engines, the water in the engine room stayed at 4 feet. Constant level, the gash leaked. The mat slowed it, the pumps matched it, equilibrium, fragile but holding. Rex moved through the ship on his routine. Visit the engine room crew, let them pet him. Move to the galley, get scraps, visit the bridge, check on the captain, find a corner and sleep. He'd wake up, start the circuit again. The crew watched him. If Rex seemed calm, they stayed calm. Rex stayed calm. February 28th, still towing. Speed dropped to 3 knots. Heavy seas. Tenacity struggled, her engines laboring, Defender dragging, acting like a sea anchor. The 2 escorts stayed close, one ahead, one behind. Their sonar operators searched constantly. No contacts, no U-boats. The wolf pack had moved on, hunting other convoys, easier targets. March 1st, 6 days since the ramming. Defender was still afloat, still being towed, still pumping. The crew was exhausted, men working on adrenaline and coffee. Some had been awake for 36 hours straight. Others grabbed sleep in 10-minute bursts, leaning against bulkheads, sitting on deck, but they kept pumping. Young Seaman Miller collapsed at his pump station at 1200 hours. Just fell over, unconscious from exhaustion. The courseman checked him. Dehydration, hypothermia, complete exhaustion. They carried him below, wrapped him in blankets, forced warm soup down his throat. 2 hours later, he was back at the pumps. Walsh tried to order him to rest. Miller shook his head. 73 men, sir. Every one matters. I pump. March 2nd, 7 days, 600 miles behind them. 200 miles ahead. St. John's was getting closer, not close enough, not yet. Defender's pumps were starting to fail. Not the hand pumps, the men. Gaskets blown, seals leaking, bodies breaking down. They kept going, no choice. Hope nothing else would break. Bradford stood on the bridge. He'd been there for 7 days without leaving his post. 7 days of watching the towing cable, 7 days of willing his ship to stay afloat. Walsh brought him food. Bradford ate standing up, watching the horizon. The executive officer studied the captain's face. The wounds had scabbed over, but they looked infected, red around the edges. The left side of Bradford's face was swollen. "Captain, please let the courseman—" "No. Sir, infection could—" "I said no." Walsh fell silent. Bradford's voice was hoarse, rough. 7 days of shouting orders over wind and engines. The captain spoke quietly. "When we dock, Commander. When every man is safe ashore. When this ship is in dry dock and not before. Understood?" Walsh nodded. "Understood, sir." The towing cable held, the collision mat held, the pumps held, everything held, barely. Rex appeared on the bridge. The dog climbed the ladder like he'd done it 1,000 times, walked over to Bradford, sat down beside him. Bradford reached down, scratched the dog's ears. "Good boy, Rex. Good boy." The dog's tail wagged. He leaned against Bradford's leg. For the first time in 7 days, Bradford smiled. March 3rd, dawn came at 0600 hours. Cold, clear. Lookout spotted land. "Newfoundland, 40 miles ahead." The crew cheered, first time in 11 days. But the celebration was short. Walsh appeared on the bridge with bad news. "Captain, the last hand pump just broke. Main shaft cracked, can't be fixed." Bradford felt something cold settle in his chest. "How many pumps left?" "7, sir, and the men are at their limit. We're losing ground. Water is rising." Bradford looked at the distant coastline. 40 miles, at 3 knots, that was 13 hours. But they didn't have 13 hours. Not with one less pump, not with the water rising. He looked at Walsh. "How long before we sink?" The executive officer had already done the math. 3 hours, maybe 4 if we're lucky. Bradford turned back to the horizon. So close, after 11 days, after 800 miles, after everything, so close. He grabbed the radio handset. "Tenacity, this is Defender. Increase speed. Emergency tow. We're sinking." The tugboat captain responded immediately. "Defender, we're at maximum safe speed for tow. Any faster risks parting the cable." Tenacity, increase speed. That's an order. Silence for a moment. Then, "Aye, Defender, increasing to 5 knots. God be with you." Tenacity's engines roared louder. Black smoke poured from her stack. The towing cable vibrated with tension. Defender surged forward, 5 knots. The stern settled lower in the water. Water in the engine room, 4 feet. 4.5. 5. The remaining 7 pumps couldn't keep up. The bucket brigades were useless now. Too much water. Too fast. 30 miles to the harbour entrance. 6 hours at 5 knots, but they had maybe 3. At 1200 hours, 2 harbour tugs came out to meet them. Northwind and Shulamite. Small tugs, but fresh. Their crews ready. They'd guide Defender in. Take over from Tenacity. Get her to the pier. 20 miles to go. Water in the engine room. 5.5 feet. 6 feet. Bradford stood on the bridge, watching the harbour entrance grow closer. Walsh appeared beside him. "Captain, we should prepare to abandon ship. If she goes down before we reach port." "She won't." "Sir, she won't go down. Not after 11 days, not after 800 miles, not when we're this close." Bradford's voice was absolute. Final. Walsh nodded. Returned to the deck. The captain stood alone, one hand on the bridge rail, the other wiping blood from his eye. The infected wound had reopened, blood and pus running down his face. He didn't care. Rex sat beside him, calm, patient, believing. 10 miles to go. Water in the engine room. 6.5 feet. 7 feet. The stern was almost underwater now. Waves washing over the fantail. Men had evacuated from below. Too dangerous. The compartments were flooding. 5 miles. The 7.5 feet. The crew assembled on the main deck. 73 men. Watching the harbour entrance, watching their ship sink beneath them. Nobody spoke. 3 miles, 8 feet. 2 miles, 8.5 feet. At 1500 hours on March 3rd, 1943, USCGC Defender entered St. John's Harbour. 11 days after ramming U-573, 4 days under tow, 800 miles from where she'd nearly sunk. Captain William Bradford still stood on the bridge. Still bleeding. Still commanding. The harbour tugs guided Defender to the pier. Her stern was underwater. Only the main deck and superstructure visible. She looked like a half-sunken wreck. But she was home. At 1700 hours, lines secured to the pier. Defender was fast. Bradford spoke into the ship's intercom, his voice hoarse but steady. "All hands, we're home." The crew collapsed where they stood, some crying, some laughing, some just sitting in silence. 11 days, 800 miles, and 73 men who refused to quit. Rex jumped to the pier first, tail wagging. The dock workers laughed. Bradford was the last man off. He walked down the gangway slowly, each step deliberate. When his feet touched the pier, his legs gave out. Walsh caught him. "Get the corpseman, now." The shipyard crew saw Defender and stopped working. They came down to the pier, stared. She was sitting low in the water, stern almost submerged, a 15-foot gash visible below the waterline. Rust streaks running down her hull from the wound. She looked dead. Should have been dead. Somehow wasn't. The yard workers got her into dry dock on March 4th, pumped out the engine room, assessed the damage. What they found was worse than expected. The gash was just the start. U-573's bowplane had punched through the hull plating, twisted frame members, damaged internal bulkheads. Salt water had flooded the entire engine room for 11 days. Corroded everything it touched. Generators, turbines, electrical systems, piping, all ruined. The repairs would take 6 months, maybe longer. The yard supervisor approached Bradford in the hospital. "Captain, it's almost easier to build a new ship." Bradford was in a bed, finally. The corpsman had cleaned his wounds, stitched the deeper cuts, bandaged his face. He'd carry scars, small ones, near his ear, on his eyelid, reminders of February 22nd. "But you won't," Bradford said. "Sir? You won't scrap her, you'll fix her. Make her better. Send her back to war." The supervisor nodded. "Yes, sir. That's the plan." On March 17th, the story hit newspapers across America. Front-page headlines: Coast Guard cutter rams U-boat. First U-boat kill for Coast Guard. Captain decorated. It was the first good news about the Battle of the Atlantic in months. Bradford received the Navy Cross. The citation read, "Extraordinary heroism and distinguished service surprising the hostile undersea craft on the surface during escort operations. Quick attempt to ram destroyed it in a fierce attack. Although painfully wounded by flying shell splinters, he gallantly remained in command throughout the action and during the subsequent period while Defender was towed safely into port." He also received the Purple Heart. Chief Steward Marcus Hayes didn't get his award until 1952, 9 years later. The Bronze Star for distinguished service as gun captain during the engagement with U-573. He was the first African-American in Coast Guard history to receive the Bronze Star. The delay was typical. Black servicemen often had to wait years for recognition, decades sometimes. Hayes waited 9 years. He deserved it on February 22nd, 1943. Got it in 1952. Better late than never, barely. Defender stayed in dry dock until July. The yard worked continuously. Replaced the damaged hull sections, installed new generators, rebuilt the engines, upgraded her radar, improved her anti-aircraft guns. When she left dry dock, she was better armed than before, faster, more capable. She returned to convoy duty in August 1943, back to the North Atlantic, back to hunting U-boats. She never rammed another submarine, never needed to. By late 1943, the Allies were winning the Battle of the Atlantic. U-boats were being sunk faster than Germany could build them. Defender kept sailing. 46 years of service, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. She became the longest-serving cutter in Coast Guard history. They called her the Queen of the Seas, not because she was the biggest, not because she was the fastest, because she refused to die. Rex stayed with Defender until 1948, 11 years at sea. He retired to Barnegat Light Station in New Jersey. Shore duty, he'd earned it. He died December 30th, 1951, 14 years old. Buried at Barnegat Light Station with full military honors. Granite marker at the base of the flagpole, a sailor home from the sea. Bradford stayed with Defender until December 1943, then received orders for shore duty, training command, teaching new officers. He kept rising through the ranks. Captain, Commodore, Rear Admiral, Vice Admiral. On June 1st, 1954, he was sworn in as Assistant Commandant of the United States Coast Guard, second highest position in the service. He served until 1962, 8 years, retired as Vice Admiral, lived until 1993, 50 years after the ramming. In interviews near the end of his life, he said he felt the presence of higher powers that night, said they had Jesus on the bow and Moses on the stern, getting them through. Maybe he believed it, maybe it was the only way to explain how Defender survived. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery, Vice Admiral, Navy Cross, Purple Heart. 50 years after ramming U-573, he'd seen Defender decommissioned, seen her sunk as a target, seen the new Defender commissioned, but he never forgot February 22nd. Defender was decommissioned in 1982, 46 years of service. In November 1984, the Navy used her as a target. Pacific Ocean, a Harpoon missile hit her. She stayed nearly intact, settling slowly. As she went under, her crew transmitted a final message. The Queen is dead. Long live the Queen. She slipped beneath the waves. 2,200 feet down, just like U-573, full circle, 41 years after the ramming. The new USCGC Defender was commissioned in 1988. She carries the name, the tradition, Rex's statue in her mess deck, the coat of arms designed by naval historian Samuel Eliot Morrison, a seahorse on each side, a crown on top, a battering ram in the center. Commemorating February 22nd, 1943. The story of Convoy SC-147 is taught at the Coast Guard Academy. Required reading: how to lead under pressure, how to make decisions when there's no time, how to save a ship when everyone says it's impossible. Bradford's decision to ram is analyzed, debated. Would it work today? Should it have worked then? The answer is both and neither. It was necessary in that moment. With that U-boat, with that crew, it worked, that's enough. U-573 stayed on the ocean floor, 2,200 feet down North Atlantic. Her crew of 47 became 37 graves. Her commander was 30 years old. He'd taken command 3 months before Defender killed him. The 12 survivors spent the rest of the war in prisoner camps. They went home in 1946. Most never talked about it. February 1943 was the crisis point of the Battle of the Atlantic. 120 ships sunk. The Germans were winning. Then came Black May, May 1943. 43 U-boats destroyed. 25% of Germany's entire operational strength gone in 1 month. The Allies figured out how to kill submarines. The U-boats stopped winning. Bradford's ramming on February 22nd was part of that, a small part, 1 U-boat out of thousands. But every U-boat sunk mattered, every convoy protected mattered, every sailor rescued mattered. 14 merchant ships lost from convoy SC-147, but 49 made it through, because 8 escorts fought 19 U-boats, because men like Bradford made decisions, because crews like Defenders refused to quit. 50 Norwegian sailors pulled from the water alive, even when U-boats were hunting, even when it meant becoming a target. That mattered too. In 1985, a reporter asked the 82-year-old retired vice admiral if he would ram that U-boat again, knowing what it cost, knowing how close they came to sinking. Bradford was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. Every single time. Because 73 men proved that impossible is just a word, and sometimes refusing to die is the only order worth giving. He died 8 years later. The last surviving officer from Defender's ramming attack. The ship outlived her captain, served longer, fought harder, refused to die, just like the men who saved her that cold February night in 1943.